Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Earthly Headlines. Today we're going to talk about the mystery of Algeria's ancient pyramids called the Djeddars. And you guys have probably never heard of them. They're really obscure archaeological site, mainly because it's in Algeria, and Algeria did not have an archaeology department in any of their colleges since like any time before the 1980s. So from 1980 onward, they had a very minimal amounts going into the research and excavations and analysis of these really interesting pyramids. And so this article came out of phys.org talking about how the authorities involved in Algeria, specifically Tiaret, which is in the northern part of Algeria, they're gonna attempt to make this place a UNESCO heritage site. So I thought it'd be pretty interesting to just go over a little bit the context and the history of the area and the people and the language and the stuff that they know, the stuff that they assumed, and the stuff that is still left in mystery, which is most of it is still shrouded in mystery. This place is known for a lack of, like I mentioned earlier, research into it. So what are the Djeddars? So there are 13 monuments on these mounds in northern Algeria. So like I mentioned earlier, it's in this place called Tiaret, and I have a map here. So right here where my cursor is, the northern part is where the site is. So if you notice, the Mediterranean's right here, Spain is over here, and the Atlantic Ocean's far to the west. If you guys see here, this is the Pillars of Heracles here, and this will be important later when I mention the specific people who lived here, which were the Berbers. So the Berbers were the sojournous group of people of northern Africa, or this part of Africa anyway. The name comes from the ancient Egyptian word for outsiders, and they've been living here. There's evidence anyway that they've been living here for at least going back 12,000 years ago, so about 10,000 BC. And that's very interesting when you're thinking about Atlantis. So I mentioned Atlantis before in a bunch of different episodes, and there are a bunch of different theories about where Atlantis is. Some say it's in Cuba, some say it's in the Mediterranean, some say it's in the Azores Plateau, which is in the Atlantic Ocean. Some people think that it's in Polynesia. There are a bunch of different theories, but one theory about what happened to the displaced people after Atlantis fell was that they eventually became Proto-Athenians. They also escaped toward northern Africa and eventually made their way to Egypt. And if you look at a map, just geographically speaking, you look at the Mediterranean Ocean and then northern Africa here. I wish I could zoom out more. Here, let's just use this example. So this is Algeria, and which is part of northern Africa. So in order to get to Egypt, you'd have to cross all over here, assuming you're a straggler from Atlantis and you're traveling from west to east. It would make sense that these Berbers are descended from these people from the Atlantic. Now, there's a group of people who do not share the same phenotypes as the people in Africa, and among them are the Berbers. Some of them had blonde hair, some of them had blue eyes, some of them were really tall. They look like Celtic people, or people from Europe, Northern Europe, for some reason. So that is a mystery in and of itself. I'm not saying that all Berber people have blonde hair. I'm just saying that there was a group of people. I cannot remember their name right now. I'm not going to look it up. But there was an island. I talked about it in a previous episode, actually. And apparently they're closely related to the Berbers. So some of the Berbers are related to these people with these outsider phenotypes, which brings you back to the linguistic evidence that the Egyptians called them outsiders. So again, anyway, all that is very interesting when you look at a place like the Djeddars, which have this really interesting story, and a lot of it is still obscured. So anyway, these monuments are thought to be burial grounds for royalty. That's as much as they know. The whole site has been plundered and pillaged. It's been damaged for a long time now. They predate the Islamic Caliphate that took over about 1,000 or so years ago, and they're pretty confident that this site dates to late antiquity, which is about 200 to 680, somewhere around there. Some of the dates vary depending on who you ask, but anyway, that's pre-Islam Northern Africa. Another thing that they found in these pyramids, I guess you can call them pyramids, or these tombs, some call them the Algerian pyramids, are you see these Latin inscriptions, and you also see these Christian iconography that are really hard to read now because they were etched in some time ago, and so over the years they've just deteriorated. But does that mean that it was created by those people, or did they happen to come upon these ruins and then they either renovated it or they made their mark on them just because they were so peculiar? No one knows that. That's how deep, or that's how shallow rather, the knowledge base is when talking about the Algerian pyramids. They could easily be older than what they think. The dates only go as far as the organic material that they found around the pyramids. It's also interesting to note that these pyramids are, again, close to Egypt and close to Libya and all these other places that also have their own pyramid system as well. And it makes you think that maybe there was a whole culture, either the entire one monolithic culture that occupied northern Africa that built pyramids, or at some point in time there was a group of people who had this ideology, or some I guess you could say a passing culture that maybe wasn't rooted in North Africa but maybe came from somewhere else, and they had adopted that culture. And which would, if that were true, that would be consistent with what the ancient Egyptians said when they talked about Zep Tepi the first time, when all the ancient Egyptian cultures and ideals and their knowledge base came from this single point, which a lot of people say was the Atlantis, hence the Atlantean mystery. Anyway, so these Djeddars, they were constructed. Now, again, these are working dates. There hasn't been much investigation into these ruins for that long. So they were constructed between the 4th and 7th centuries, so late antiquity. They were built as a resting place for the Berber royalty, although nobody knows who truly laid within. So you get this narrative here, right? They're not sure, but they're just going to say it anyway. So who knows if it was for Berber royalty. They want to get it listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So around this time, a little bit more historical context, the Berber kings ruled the area in small fiefdoms whose history is poorly known, and there's a few traces were left. So you guys are getting this pattern here. You talk about Berbers, you talk about Algerian history, and once you go back 1,000 plus years, there's really nothing that they're going off of, just either local stories if they have them, or second or third hand accounts of their visiting here. They do know that it was part of Rome's Western Empire. It was the Roman province of Numidia, and then the Vandals and Byzantine troops invaded after that, and then the Arab forces stormed across North Africa during their conquest of Al-Andalus, which is Spain. And then the whole place is just looted and ravaged. So there's really not much to go yet. There's probably a bunch of stuff that they could find if they just had the time, technology, and the resources dedicated toward its investigation. There are certain spots that these students, a group of 20 or so archaeology students and their professors, they've been meticulously just brushing certain parts of the pyramid. They're trying to find any sort of nuance, something peculiar, maybe an inscription or something, some clue that they can just build from. So they're starting from the ground up right now. And it's only been like 20, maybe 30 years since they've actually been doing this. What makes it worse is when the French occupied the area, there are archives on the Djeddars. And they don't really, they're not available right now. So even the archaeologists studying, they're on their own, essentially. The only stuff that's allegedly in the French archives are objects and bones found during the colonial era, which were taken back to France. And who knows, maybe they're locked in a vault somewhere, maybe someone took them home and they're just in someone's attic. Nobody knows where they are now. So they're really not going, they can't go off of anything concrete. Like I mentioned earlier, archaeology was not taught at Algerian universities until the early 80s. And even now there's no specialty on funerary monuments, so you can't major in that. So each pyramid that they know of now, it contains at least one room, and the largest mound gives way to a labyrinth of 20 compartments, including funerary chambers. Some rooms are equipped with benches, areas researchers believe may have been used for worship. So when you look at the Egyptian pyramids, like at Giza, they say that it was a tomb for a king or a pharaoh. But there's no bodies found in there. There's no even Egyptian hieroglyphs found in there. I mentioned earlier that they found some, in the Algerian pyramids, they found some Christian inscriptions, some stuff in Latin. But that could have been made way after the fact. So, do you guys see where I'm getting at? This is it's completely shrouded in mystery. The jury's still out how old it is and what its role may have been in the society that built it. Because up until this point, the Berbers, according to mainstream history, were just a loose group of fiefdoms and tribes that were just like I said, a loose conglomeration of people. So in order to undertake a project of this caliber, there's got to be some sort of conformity going. There's got to be some sort of uniform vision that is being undertaken. Otherwise, it would take centuries to build these things. So who knows how old they are. But if the Berber people have been around there since the end of the Younger Dryas, which supposedly destroyed Atlantis, which supposedly had a population of people who were displaced, who supposedly became the Berbers and the people who inhabited northern Algeria and northern Africa. If all that's true, then that's huge, right? Then that should be front page news somewhere. But, they haven't gotten that far yet. This is all speculation, but this is a definite possibility. Because displaced people had to go somewhere, right? So they found Christian symbols, hunting scenes, animal figures. And here's in the cave, one of the caves nearby the monuments, they found one of these paintings here, or this cave painting. And this dates to like 10,000 BC or something like that. So this is obviously a human person. And if you look at the proportions and everything, they seem to be correct. So it's not a goblin, it's not a giant or anything, it's a person, definitely. So they were able to produce this back then. Traces of inscriptions believed to be in Latin marked the walls, but time has rendered them unreadable. They found Greek letters as well, but they can't even agree what was written because it's so damaged. And then Islam came and just erased everything or destroyed this place even more. And you can see these blocks here. These are giant blocks. And even some of the Djeddars have never been entered. And then there's just so much more they could have worked with if they'd just gotten there earlier. But that's how a lot of these archaeological sites are. I mean, they just find them in tatters, and still they're able to find some anomaly under the rubble that they could find and create this huge discovery out of just even the most minute details. So just to put these in perspective, they've been at this for maybe the better part of 10, maybe 20 years now, just sifting through stuff, and they still haven't found as much. They haven't found anything to disprove the main, I guess you can call the main narrative about this place. But it's probably there. The place is so mysterious that there's got to be something somewhere that indicates its true nature. The size of these things, they're about 18 meters high or 60 feet high. Some say the size of the Djeddars puts them in a category of their own. The earliest known description of the Djeddars were made by historian Ibn Rakik in the 11th century. So they weren't even talked about in history until Islam was firmly entrenched in its empire. I think the Umayyad Caliphate, if I'm not mistaken. It could be the Abbasids. It might have been the Abbasids. I'm not sure. It doesn't say in the article. And then the French came in the 1800s, and they didn't really help because they looked and they took everything back to France, and now it's just gone. There's no account of where those artifacts are. And maybe you'll see an article down the line where someone discovers them in some vault somewhere, because not too long ago there was a similar story. I think it had to do with Shakespeare. Like Shakespeare had some like extra verses that people forgot about in the archives, and then some grad student was looking for material for their paper and stumbled upon them. So maybe something like that will happen in Algeria, or maybe France. And then Algeria went through like some political issues, so they couldn't really safely explore the area. And even some of the structures have never even been entered, period. So who knows what's in there? They're just drawing all these conclusions based on just speculation. So that's why I feel comfortable speculating its history and what's in them, because they're speculating. So this is all, maybe I'm not helping, but I'm trying to maintain a level of openness as to who or what or why these things are here. And I think that only helps with adding interest and drawing interest in the subject. So yeah, that's pretty much it. These maps are pretty interesting. If you just look at the geography, here's one of the pictures. I don't think this is the biggest one, but you can see how deteriorated it is. Maybe in its heyday it was much more resembled more of a large pyramid, because now it kind of looks like a mound and a pyramid at the same time. It's kind of rounded off, but you can see there's still some walls left, or whatever you want to call it, these blocks that are still intact that give a strong indication of what it looked like in its heyday. So yeah, these Berber people are really interesting. The fact that these Djeddars are here, the fact that there are pyramids all over northern Africa, and then not to mention the ones in Giza and in Egypt, is very peculiar. And then there's something here, guys, definitely. So let me know what you guys think. Any additional knowledge would be welcome. Any observations or any literature or anything else that mentions these places. I don't think that there are, that I haven't mentioned, but there might be. Or any theories as to who these people are, where they came from, and why they would build these pyramids are most welcome. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.